I had recently graduated high school and was ready to start college in a couple of months. You see, I stayed on college campus, and the college I ended up going to was not that big, but I was a female and did not have that many friends, as I stayed on the top floor of my college dorm, which was the only females area. The next day, I had class, and I went to math class. After that, I had volleyball practice, which I would have practice until 5 p.m. to almost 8 p.m. The volleyball practice were pretty long. Sometimes I would stay over to try to get better at volleyball. After heading back to my college dorm, I then stopped by the student cafeteria that we had in our college, which was where most college students would catch up and hang out. I then started to make my way back to my college dorm and get ready for bed. I would try to get in bed at 12 p.m. The next morning, I did not have class, so I went to volleyball practice. And after practice was over, I then went to grab something to eat because it was getting dark and I hated walking in the dark. After that, I started to walk back to my college dorm, and the weather was feeling pretty good. It was warm, but it was also starting to get dark. I could see due to the fact our college had lights around the campus, so people would not get lost walking back to their dorms. But my room was on the other side of the campus, which was almost a 30-minute walk. I would always walk to try to burn more calories. As I started to get close to my room, I then had to cross the college street that we had, and I started to hear footsteps. I then looked back and could not see anyone as I made it to my room and started to get ready for bed. I then heard knocking on my door. I then picked up my phone and could see that the time was almost 5 in the morning, which I did not feel like getting out of bed to check who it was. I then went back to sleep, and after 15 minutes, I heard knocking again. I then went to go see who was at the door. I began to look through the peephole in my front door, and could not see nobody. I then was frustrated because I was trying to sleep, and I thought someone was trying to play prank games at this time. I then started to close my eyes as I heard screaming coming from the hallway, someone banging on my door saying, "Let me in." I could hear a female who was terrified, and she kept saying, "Please let me in." I then let the woman into my dorm and began to lock the door and asked what was going on. As the woman then explained that there is a man who is trying to kill her. I then asked the woman, "What does the man look like? And have you called the police yet?" The woman said yes, she called the police, and the man was tall and had black hair and brown eyes. The man was also an older man, maybe in his 30s, and he had a knife. I then was scared and started to think, what if I'm not safe? Because I let her in my room door. I then started to ask if he knew the guy, which he said no. The guy was a stalker who has been stalking her ever since she left work Friday, which I then heard the door handling moving and started to hear footsteps, as if the man had on some heavy boots, because his footsteps were really loud, and could hear the female screaming, because the man was loud and was saying, "Where is she?" which woke everyone up on my floor, and even on the bottom floor, as I could hear all the females in the building crying and screaming, which the cops then showed up after the man began to try to break into my room door. He got his head through the door, and could see the female who he wanted, which her name was Bella. I then heard a lot of footsteps rush up the stairs, due to the fact our college room doors, walls were really light, and you could hear everything through it. I then heard a group of police demanding for the man to drop the knife. After the police got rid of the man, me and Bella became friends, and we have been friends ever since, probably because I have saved her life. All my life I wanted to become a teacher, and not just any type of teacher, a college professor type, which I would teach science, due to the fact I was good at science and enjoyed the subject. I had got my degree and became a college professor for this one college, which the college was small, but it also looked really nice. I figured I would start out small and work my way up, because I was new and needed experience before moving to the bigger city to teach at the bigger colleges. My room I teached in was nice. It had artwork of science, and I had a customized desk that I was proud of. But as I arrived early, around 6 a.m., I then got a tour around the school and my classroom, which I would be teaching science. Our class would start at 8 a.m., and I had to teach 3 different classes at different times. So my schedule was busy on the work days. The time was now 8 a.m., and I introduced myself to the class, telling the class my name is, which my name was Steve. I then gave the students their college papers that talked about the requirements for this class, keeping it simple due to the fact it was the first day of college, and I did not want to overwhelm my students, but I did tell all my students that this is just the beginning, so be ready. After teaching at that college for a couple of months, I then gave a couple of my students bad grades because they did not try. And when I mean they did not try, I mean they put their name down and put a big X on the paper, which I thought was weird. I then went home and began to make dinner for my girlfriend Ariana. After making dinner, we then sat down and watched a movie. The next morning, I went to college and saw the 2 students that I gave bad grades to, which I thought was going to be a grown-up talk, which the students then said, "You will regret that." I then called security on these men who would threaten me in my classroom. After I started to stay over at the college to try and catch up on some grades that needed to be graded, which the college lights then went out. As my classroom was pitch black, I could not see nothing. I began to pull out my phone light to try to see better, which I could barely see. I then packed my things and began to leave. to get home and try to actually have light so I could try to grade these papers. After making my way to the exit, I then was outside the campus and could see 2 grown men holding a gun. I then ran the other way and tried to find a hiding spot because I could not outrun a bullet and my car was a 10-minute run. As I hid in a bush, I then texted my girlfriend and told her to call the police and told her that I am at the college campus. As I heard the men mumbling to each other, trying to find me, I could hear the cop sirens. I then heard fast footsteps as the men began to run. I then told the police the situation and who those men were, which the police said they would try and find them. But after that happened to me, I then went home, and ever since that day, I still have not seen those guys, and they have not been to class either. I remember this day like it happened yesterday. I started college in late October and was going to be living on campus, which I got my room dorm, and this would be where I'd be living at. I stayed on the bottom floor of my college dorm hallway, and the area was the only females area. After going to my first class, I then started to walk back to my dorm, which was a 10-minute walk for me. But I then made it in my room and began to cook some food before I would sit down and study for the big math exam we had tomorrow. After cleaning up and eating, I then studied for an hour until I started to get ready for bed. I would try to be asleep around 12 a.m. I then was asleep and got woken up to someone knocking at my door. I then checked my phone and could see the time was now at 1 a.m. It had only been an hour I'd been asleep for. I heard knocking at my door. I then checked the door and did not see anyone. I then went back to bed for a few hours until again woke up to hearing wind coming into my room, which I then saw that my window was open and the room was pitch black and I could not see anything. I then grabbed my phone and turned on the flash and still could not see anyone. I then turned on my lights and closed my window, and as I checked my room, I did not find anything. But as I began to look under my bed, I then saw a mask, which the mask was not mine, and I was not sure whose mask it was, due to the fact I lived alone in my college dorm, and I never invited anyone in my college dorm. I then started to feel paranoid. The mask was creepy. It had a creepy smile with it. I then was creeped out and went back to bed. The next morning, I went up to my college police and asked if they could find out who this mask belonged to, because it was in my room and I think someone had broken into my college dorm last night while I was sleeping.